At Home Around the World with Michael Lee. Welcome everyone, and here we are again for yet another episode of At Home Around the World of 39 Essex Chambers with Michael Lee. Michael needs no introduction, but for what should be done, must be done. The brief intro of Michael is that Michael is the Vice President and the Head of Asia for the AAA-ICDR Asia CMC, that is the American Arbitration Association International Center of Dispute Resolution Asia Case Management Center. As the head of AAA-ICDR Asia Case Management Center in Singapore, Michael primarily oversees the entire operation of the association's Asia CMC and leads the association's efforts in cultivating ties and developing business opportunities. Michael is also in charge of many AAA-ICDR's educational programs for the Corporate Council, the association's international panel of neutrals and practicing attorneys in Asia. For the association's panel of neutrals, Michael is on the association's annual internal review board as a part of continuing efforts to maintain the highest qualified panel of neutrals. Michael is also charged with the AAA-ICDR's International Symposium for the arbitrators in the Asia region to train international panel members and to constantly update existing arbitrators with any new developments. Through his experience as an international case manager at the AAA-ICDR New York office, Michael hopes to benefit the Asian legal community with his first-hand experience and knowledge of the rules and procedures. Michael is a New York attorney with an LLM degree in international commercial arbitration from Stockholm University Law School in Sweden and a JD from St. Thomas University Law School in Florida. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Michael, we have lots of questions at this episode of At Home Around the World, and I think I'm going to just kick off by asking you perhaps a more personal question. We've seen you as the head of Asia and vice president of the AAA-ICDR, and you have been instrumental, Michael, in contributing to the arbitration ecosystem in Singapore, right perhaps from the inception of Maxwell Chambers. But for those who don't know Michael Lee, who is the real Michael Lee?
It's not as glamorous as I want it to be, if I am truly being honest with you. I am, to an extreme end, an introvert and also anxious. So in one word, I am anxious introvert. Doesn't sound good, but I think there is a flip side of me that not many people get to see. So behind this charming, handsome-looking person, there's anxious, nervous introvert there.
The anxious introvert. I will get back to the anxious introvert part, Michael. But moving on from the anxious introvert, look, the AAA-ICDR, as we've all known, is one of the largest arbitral institutions in the world. Having seen tremendous growth in the US, what, in your opinion, AAA-ICDR has to do differently in the Asian market?
It's a good question. And it's a question that I think a lot of people ask each other, what can you do things differently? In my personal opinion, there are a lot of arbitration institutions, good arbitration institutions out there. And even though we say a lot of things as if it makes them one of the best, I think more institutions share more similarities than differences. At the end of the day, this is where you file your case, have your arbitrator appointed, and then go through the proceeding and get a decision. So we do similar things. So the question really is not what can we do differently, but what we do things a little bit better than the others. There are differences, but differences are minor in terms of user's perspective. So I think we should do similar things, but better, perhaps.
And similar things, but better. But And that sort of tags on to your personal journey, I believe, of setting up the Asia CMC for AAA-ICDR. But when you had set it up, what was your goal at that point in time? And do you think you're on that path to achieve that goal for AAA-ICDR in Asia?
Yes, I think I have achieved everything there was to achieve. No. When this journey, I think my journey sort of coincides with Singapore's journey. When I first came to Singapore, that was about 14 years ago. Maxwell Chambers was not even there. It was being gutted out. It was being built. I was stationed in a old, sort of a deserted Supreme Court building with very little people. And then we didn't know what we were doing. We had an idea of what we wanted to become. But that's where SIC was residing. That's where my office was. And a small staff of Ministry of Law people who are working on Maxwell Chambers. So back then, the idea of representative office or satellite office wasn't popular. So we really didn't have any institutions to benchmark on. So it was good and bad at the same time. It was good because I didn't have any other competition or models that I need to be better at. But it was bad because there was no example to follow. So from that point on, we became what we are today. And basically, we were shaping it. So if your question was whether I achieved what I wanted to achieve, it's difficult to say, but I think it's work in progress. We have come quite a long while, achieved some, but certainly not everything.
But then, and thank you for that, Michael, but then it sort of brings to bear the question, look, one cannot ignore the word AAA and the word American in the word AAA. So being an American institution, how does one or the users primarily deal with the fear of US-style litigation, including deposition, interrogatories, discoveries, and so on, because that's not really the style of international arbitration?
No, it's not. And I don't know how many times I apologize for discoveries and interrogatories and depositions that U.S. litigation lawyers often employ, and we get blamed for it. I also don't think it's fair that we get blamed for it because it's not the product that we created or even recommend. In fact, we may be the only institution in the world that has a rule dedicated to discovery and depositions, interrogatories. And it says right there is all those things that U.S.-style lawyers often employ are not used in international arbitrations. And over the years, because we knew that as an American institution, we get blamed for it quite a bit, it actually benefits a lot of lawyers during the process. And we have tried to educate arbitrators to manage their proceedings better. But they have often told us that unless we empower them, there's limit to what they can do in terms of requests for discoveries. So it started out as a guidelines for document exchanges, and it wasn't sort of powerful enough. So we adopted as a part of the rule, so the arbitrators can actually cite the rules to manage their proceedings, perhaps even a little better.
But, and I appreciate the answer, of course. And that sort of ties in with the growth of how arbitration has evolved, especially in Asia. And you've been a part of this phenomena globally, Michael. But, we say that the past may not always be a prologue. Definitely not for the present, and most certainly not for the future. So in this constant process of arbitration evolving, what are some areas of case management and administration you would like to reform within the AAA-ICDR and with a focus on Asia case management?
Boy, that's a big question, and that's an important question. case management has to be at the core of every institutions, because whether we admit it or not, we are in a service industry. Who we are serving, that's a separate question. But I can tell you that from where I stand, we don't serve the arbitrators. We don't serve the lawyers who represent the parties. I think we serve corporations that may or may not even have disputes with us. The corporations that go on and do their businesses. They put us in. It shows sort of a credibility, shows that things will happen the way they want it to. If things go wrong, they have a plan. So not just the corporations that come to us because of a dispute, but all the corporations that have us in their clauses. Case management is important because over the years, I hate to admit it, that even if we say we want to be neutral and fair, we were inevitably creating some disadvantage towards Asian parties because our New York office was closed during the business of Asia. So when we closed the New York office every night, and then the Asian people come to work, they have no one to call. They can write an email, but they will only get a reply the next day. Whereas New York attorneys, if they have a question, they can just pick up the phone and then call us, and then we're right there. If they send us an email, they get a reply within a couple of minutes. I just didn't think that was fair. So in order to create a fair, more accessible institutions with case management, I was determined to sort of change the way we administer cases. And then that took a lot of convincing because internally, I think, including us with all the other institutions, they have case ownership, meaning a case counsel takes charge of a particular case. And to achieve what we wanted to achieve, we had to employ sort of co-managing cases. So one counsel in New York and one counsel in Singapore, both of them manages the same case. That was a tricky bit, but I think we have achieved that. But if not case management, then the arbitration institution really has lost its purpose. We're not an event organizers that make profit out of holding events. We're not training people to be on our panel. But case management is at the core of everything that we must do.
So I understand that you mentioned that case management is important, and I also see the distinction why you say that the AAA-ICDR case management is unique. That is, the users have the advantage that they can call up in any time zone and there'll be somebody to now take care of that call. But really, how important is case management? That's one distinction. How do you think the AAA-ICDR's case management, in addition to now having offices in Asia and catering to its client, is different, and perhaps the case management is different, and perhaps more that can be done for the case management? Do you have any suggestions for that?
I wish we were faster. I think we have achieved more than we have done in the past. In terms of reform that you asked in a previous question, or if we want to change anything, what would I change? I wish we could be we could be quicker and better and more efficient. We have case management software that enables us to take on more cases compared to paper filings and paper handling. But I think at this day and age, we could do far better. Exactly how, I don't know. It's not just me, it's the entire organization that has to move accordingly. And we have a dedicated team, just IT folks, that just handles our software part. But, they have a lot on their plates, and then we have to go through ticketing systems. So there's some bureaucracy there that I had to clear. But I want to make many changes.
Look, And thank you for being so candid. I totally understand how difficult it can be to make changes in any institution, and AAA-ICDR being a very good institution, I can totally appreciate that. But about case management, you hear the term that an arbitration is as good as an arbitrator. And from what I hear is that it is very difficult to get on the AAA-ICDR's panel. So how could you tell us more about what is the process of getting on through the panel, who takes that decision, and how that process comes about?
First, you have to buy me a lot of lobster dinners. But our process, I think we pride ourselves in having a quality panel. Our panel is considered as one of the most difficult panels to get on. For now, I think we have about 850 people, half of them outside the United States. And our panel is not supposed to be used as a training ground for new arbitrators who wants more experiences. You can think of it this way. On one hand, you have Lucy Reed as party-appointed arbitrators, and perhaps on the other hand, you have Gary Bourne as another party-appointed arbitrators. Our panel members, our list is often used to appoint the chairperson. So we need to be really careful about who we put on our panel, because potentially he'll be a presiding arbitrator when there's Lucy Reed and a Gary Bourne on both sides.
So does that then mean, Michael, that it is very difficult to get a first appointment from AAA-ICDR?
If you somehow manage to get on the panel, and then let me explain how you can get on the panel. The basic requirements are rather straightforward. It takes, it says 15 minutes, 15 years of experience. And it's easy to find people with 15 years of experience. But what we also require is a letter from your peers, recommendations. And then when we receive recommendations, we actually read them. Sometimes we reach out to them to see if the recommender actually has a personal experience, a relationship with them, or how well do they know. And then it goes through a two-step process. There's an external review board, the people that I trust, and then I share those names, their CVs, and then they give us a ranking in terms of if they ever have a case, would they appoint them as an arbitrator. And then we have an internal board where I sit as the final sort of a gatekeeper in terms of how to accept, who to accept and who not to.
Okay. So lobster dinners and some Michelin stars added to it.
Definitely.
Well, thank you for that. On the question of appointment of arbitrators, so once you are on the panel and say you have a Lucy Reed and you have, Gary Bourne and a David Bateson or a Loretta Malintopi, who takes that decision on the day of appointing a chair or a sole arbitrator? What are the criteria that one looks into? Of course, experience is one, but is there a list that somebody makes? Is there a case counsel who does that, and who is that? How do you decide from those 850 names on that day?
Well, as soon as the case gets going, the first thing we do is to get parties on the call. So that happens usually within 2 weeks of initiating the case. Now, this is before the respondent even had a time to write a reply. So we try to have a call with them. And then at that moment, the respondent is really nervous because they haven't gotten to know the case yet. But we assure them this is just an administrative conference call. And during the call, something important happens. The case counsel asks the parties what sort of an arbitrator do they want to see. They give us expertise, skills, nationalities, their place of residence. We use all of that as a reference to search. So the case counsel directors literally go online on our search database and then go through 850 names to find 10 to 15 names that fits more or less most of the criteria that was given by the parties. And then once we have the name of 15, we don't just appoint somebody and then notify the parties. We send them the 15 names as they are. And then parties each view that list. It's the same identical list. And if they see a name that they don't want to see, they will just simply strike them out. And if they are survivors, they rank them by order of their preferences. They don't exchange these lists. They send it to us confidentially, and then we get to compare the list from claimant and respondents together. And amazingly, what happens more often than not is same people survives the list, strike, and similar people come up with a better ranking than the others. Then it makes our job easier to appoint that particular arbitrator. So number one, the parties get to participate in the appointment process in a meaningful way. Number two, people they don't want never gets appointed.
Interesting. That's quite a sort of elaborate. And how much time does this process normally take?
Well, it takes 2 weeks and 2 weeks, so about 4 weeks. So it's still a delay, but we thought that it's such an important part of the process.
Absolutely. So moving on, thank you again for that explanation, Michael. But what about thought leadership? Does AAA-ICDR consider educating users? Do you think it is important to educate, a jurisdiction? Do you think an institution shares that responsibility? And what support, if any, do you think do you need as an institution from the users to help you educate, if at all you think it is important to do that?
I had an early discussion with Francis Goh about educations, and we were talking about the same thing. Turned out that we just call it different things. Francis was referring that particular thing as an education. We were referring that particular thing as a marketing. So it turns out it was, how do you market educations? First of all, I think institutions have to educate. Problem is, almost all of them are not-for-profit NGOs. Some have government funding, some doesn't. And for those institutions that do not have government funding, in order to put up a marketing campaign with an event that you want to sell, it costs a lot of money. And I firmly believe that we're an institution that doesn't generate our revenue through selling tickets to our event. So our events generally are at no cost. We do have to get sometimes sponsorship. So what we need to do is put up one heck of an education system. What we also have to do on top of that is come up with great idea of marketing it. But from the community, we need sponsors and we need people to buy the tickets. So when the tickets sell, then we know what we're doing is right and we can do more. Fortunately, some of the developing countries have resource problems. I wish I can be there, but a lot of times I'm not allowed.
Right. But, speaking of marketing, Michael, there are so many strong institutions in Asia, and I'm mindful that I'm perhaps now treading on something more sensitive and arguably controversial. There's no denying that there is this competition, right? And you're an American institution, you're in Asia, there are other institutions. I've had a very sort of serious background with an institution, the time that I have spent. How do you deal with that presence, or if you like, competition with institutions?
First of all, you used to be my enemy, right?
Just an admirer, Michael, always an admirer.
So how do I deal with competition? I can tell you that I deal with the competition with much difficulties and jealousy, to be honest.
Jealousy?
Yes. I envy the institutions that has a lot of government fundings because it gives them more resources to work with. I envy smaller, younger institutions because of their ambitions and their ability to change things quickly. As a 100-year-old organization, we want to be quick, but it has its limits. So that's how I deal with our competition.
I'm really enjoying this talk because I must tell you, this is one of the most honest and candid talks I've had. So something on a lighter note. So, Michael, I've known you for a very long time, since a student actually. And you've been inspiration to many colleagues, friends, students, and others. But what inspires you, Michael? As a person, as an arbitration practitioner, as a head of an institution?
I have my heroes, but I wouldn't call them my inspirations. If I have to name an inspiration, a lot of superhero movies, like Spider-Man. When you have great power, you have great responsibilities. So those movies, but to be honest, if you ask me what keeps me up at night, what inspires me to wake up the next morning is problems, issues, difficulties that people may go through, because I love coming up with solutions. Maybe I think that's why I'm in this business to begin with. But when things go wrong, I actually find joy in them.
Wait, I said I'll come back to your anxious introvert part. And I think now is a good time. So you wake up trying to solve problems. And we're going to do a little bit of a rapid round to see how your anxious introvertness plays down with what you do at AAA. What is the mantra for networking, therefore, for you and your relationship with social media? I'm going to ask you a question. Are you on social media? Are you on Instagram?
No.
Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, but I don't control them.
Are you on Facebook?
No.
Do you use WhatsApp?
Yes, with you.
Thank you. So how do you manage your anxious introvertness with the need to be extroverted when you are at an institution?
How do I deal with them? Short answer is I don't.
You don't
deal with them. And then if I have to, I do that with much difficulties. I understand the social media. I understand the need for posting, get tractions, get a lot of likes. But I think I like depth more than numbers of people that I know and the number of people that may be following me. I understand and see the value, and I understand the trend. It's something that is just very hard for me. So how do I deal with extrovert duties that I have, and you have seen me in those settings? I usually stick with people that I feel comfortable with. So I stick with you. We spoke a lot during those times. I have difficulties walking up to strangers and say, "Hi, my name is Michael." That is something very, very difficult. I manage, but I still hate doing it.
So apart from arbitration, apart from your deep-rooted anxiousness to not be able to go up and say hello to a stranger, what's your other interests? Do you like geography, cooking, golf, tennis? Is that what has helped you sort of maintain that calmness around you? Oh,
yes. As you mentioned, I cook. I used to be a chef prior to this life. So
I did not know you were a chef. I know you like to cook, but you were actually a chef.
Yes, it was a Japanese chef. So I know a thing or two about cooking. When I had to do it as a profession, I hated it. But now that I do it as a hobby, I make special meals at home. So usually on weekends, I do breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Wow.
But that calms me down because I put something in it and something comes out. And if I like taking pictures, you see, the industry that you and I are in, you put so much in it, and it takes a decade to see the results. So I'm in it for the long haul, but sometimes it's just too long. I need something that's quick, that I can see my effort. So cooking does that. Taking picture does that. Golf is something that I do just so I don't think about a million things that pops up in my head.
Like, this has been a fantastic conversation, Michael. But before I end this conversation, I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm going to take the liberty because I've heard a rumor. And I think for everybody who's watching this talk, I think we need to get clarity on this rumor. Is it true that you got married in Maxwell Chambers and that was the first official event hosted in Maxwell Chambers? Is that true?
Yes.
I knew it.
That was interesting. Well, my wife and I have been married. When we first came over here, I came here with a work permit, and we didn't bring our marriage certificate. In order for her to legally stay, we had to submit our marriage certificate. And since we didn't bring it, I thought, what a great idea to marry my wife again. So this is when we moved into the new Maxwell Chambers. The paint was new. There wasn't anybody, and I got SIC folks, Maxwell Chambers folks, and I said, would you please come join me witnessing marrying my wife again? And they all came, and then that was our first event.
Fantastic. Wow, what an incredible experience. Michael, thank you so much. We've reached the end of this talk. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Thank you so much for coming to the 39 Essex offices in Singapore. And we wish you all the best and we're rooting for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, guys.